Welcome to the Chris Hand Show. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in this week. We had a great time yesterday. Appreciate you guys engaging. If you'd like to continue the trend, SuperTalk text line 615-737-9986. That's 615-737-9986. We've got an interesting show today. We're going to talk about Nikki Haley and slavery.
Oh,
yeah.
Great.
Just a nice light open to your morning. We're going to, at some point, discuss Jesus the Palestinian. And, there's the funding of the government coming up. It's a thing.
Yeah, it's happening.
Yeah. Or not.
Or it just won't, actually.
Maybe
That's
also not that. So a couple things that I wanted to mention first. Yesterday, I brought in my 9-year-old Hayden, the little beast, and you guys treated him wonderfully, and I appreciate that. And hopefully that was useful for you guys, too, to hear from a young kid about what's going on. I still find it fascinating how much our children pick up on the issues of the day and the things that we're talking about. And particularly for him, he's 9.
Yeah.
And the one issue that he thinks about the most is actually immigration.
Really?
We talked about it on the way in and on the way home.
Very interesting.
Yeah, well, because for him, he's like, Dad, this is kind of like an invasion, right? And I'm like, well, when you have millions of people coming into your country without authorization, wait a minute. You're kind of right there, buddy. And I think I want to talk about that a little bit from a fact-based standpoint, and we'll pull up some of the information there. But
he was great yesterday, by the way.
Thank you.
Seriously, he was awesome. I just have to say, I was thinking about it yesterday after the show through the afternoon. Just his first answer about making friends and being able to disagree with people. Obviously, I know those things, but you forget them in everyday life. You just grow and you just kind of forget those innocent things that you have as a child just innately. And it was really good. It was really nice, refreshing to hear that and just be like, yeah, you're right, man.
So it
okay.
sounds kind of dumb, but one of the things I've listened to him and listened to my other boys, that it's okay to ask people if they'll be your friend.
Yeah.
I know that sounds really simple, but
Yeah.
a lot of times we forget, right? To be like, I like you. I like hanging out with you. Can we be friends?
Yeah, can we be? Yeah.
And that's as kids, that's how we say it, right?
Uh-huh.
There is like, we're affirming the status of our relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
We are friends, not mere acquaintances. And I think the erosion of relationships as an adult, really, like once you get out of school, it's like, wait a minute.
I'm now realizing that. Yes.
How do you make friends?
Yeah. Wait. What is this? Where are friends?
And I know some people are like, well, you go to church. I'm like, okay, cool. You can make friends at church, but there's a lot of people at church, sadly, that just want to exchange pleasantries and leave and go to lunch.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
they don't want to invite you. They just want to go, check the box, and leave. Now, that's a church problem. That's something churches need to address. But, people say, well, then if not church, at bars. I'm like, okay, but like you're not really a lot of times getting people as they are. You're getting people trying to blow off steam and, a few drinks in. And that's not the easiest way to build relationships.
Yeah, you're not developing a long-lasting connection.
Exactly. And it's that I think the one thing is people know how to build relationships, I think, a little bit better with the opposite sex. It's like I'm trying to date you or do something. But like friend is tough.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I don't actually want to be in a marriage with you. I just want to be your friend.
I just want to hang out sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
And just enjoy being around you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And our kids do such a good job of it because it just comes, I think, naturally to
Yeah.
them.
Yes.
But as we age, we kind of figure out how to be terrible.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, but I've seen your social media profile and there's the things that you disagree with me on. And
I can't get past it.
Right.
And now it just ruins my view of you. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm old enough now. I'll be 42 in January. I'm old enough now to remember a time before I probably wouldn't have married and reproduced if social media were really a thing when I was in college. Because my wife would have been like, oh, no.
No way. Yeah.
Right. And the pre-screening of people in our lives.
Yeah.
is a problem because we need to be exposed to people who don't agree with us on everything. And so what happens is we pre-screen them, and then they pretty much agree with us on everything. And we are shocked to encounter a person in the wild who's like, what you think is stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
And, thankfully I do things in the real world, Mac. Like, it's really neat. I don't just hang
Wow,
out on
look
Twitter
at you.
and talk radio. And, some of my friends are very different than me politically. And it's truly like, I had a guy, after I got off the air yesterday, reach out to me, and he's like, look, this is totally confidential, but I have questions. Like, is Trump going to win? And I was like, why is this confidential? We can talk about this. What are the chances of Nikki Haley being successful in the primary? Again, not confidential. She's running for, why do people hate Joe Biden? And
very public topics, conversations.
Right. But felt like, I don't want, you don't have to admit you're talking to me about these things.
Gotcha.
And I think the answer is, yeah, you do. Like, we should. And I answered his questions in a very straightforward fashion. But I think that's something that we can kind of learn from kids. And I'm going to try to have my oldest son, so youngest and oldest. I have 4 in my house right now, but 2 of them I have offered to engage you guys. And I really want you to hear from my teenage son about what's happening and impacting teenagers. Because that's a world where it's like, we're about to send these off. My son's a freshman at Nolensville High School. We're about to send these kids out into the wild. Okay, what are they up against? What does this mean? What's life like for them? What is the things that we're going to talk about his phone. And
that's a big one.
The fact that we have an open phone policy that I can see everything that's on that. It annoys the daylights out of him, but he appreciates it and he understands it. And we're going to talk about some of those things. I think it's going to be relevant to a lot of you who have teenagers. And some of the conversation at the end of yesterday, I want to pick up on because I think it's incumbent on talk radio and as a columnist for a number of publications, including the Tennessean, for us to have some difficult conversations and talk about things that people don't want to talk about. And it shocked me yesterday because usually I've written extensively about porn and minors, like, access to pornography. Like, these are all topics but I hadn't sort of updated the research in a minute. And yesterday on the air, I pulled up some resources. I hadn't had time to sort of process them. And I started doing that last night, and I was just blown away. I was like, oh, my goodness, it's actually gotten worse.
I was thinking about just the two numbers you said yesterday. What was it, 80% or 79% of men, and then it was close to 40% of women?
Yeah, we'll go back through some of those today, but I want to, focus on some of the high notes so you guys know what you're up against, know what your kids are up against, and understand the culture. Because, again, we talk about wanting to fight against woke culture. We talk about wanting to fight against what's happening. Well, what do we mean by that? And it can't just be we express our feelings very loudly. Like, it has to be like, okay, well, what does that mean? What does it mean for truth to prevail? What does it mean for character to count? Like, what are these things and why are they important and what can we do about it? And so I want to talk about that. We'll also get to I want to do an update on a story that's over on the Tennessean. It was the 24-hour hold rule in Williamson County when essentially they arrest a minor. It's an interesting story. I talked about it on the Matt Murphy Show, filling in. State Senator Jack Johnson immediately engaged, and hopefully I messaged him. Hopefully we'll have an update. But I want to share that with this audience too, just so folks are aware of some of the things that are happening that fly below the radar that should absolutely make you think. And we'll talk about that story. So we've got a lot to get to. Before we start digesting all of this, did you happen to see any of the Duke's Mayo Bowl?
I actually did, and I saw one clip of a guy in line downing some Duke's Mayo by himself. That's the only thing I saw from this.
So when West Virginia won the game, they doused their coach in an industrial-sized vat of mayonnaise. I always see it appeared to be excuse me, that's just disgusting.
So gross.
I love Dukes. I love Dukes on
I like
everything.
mayo, yeah.
The head ball coach is not a thing that I love mayo on. And
Lathered.
Yes, and so I think they watered it down, but
That's even grosser though. The viscosity changing and have it being liquid.
that's almost worth losing the game. Because if there's no way he knew that ahead of time. And had he known, can you imagine doing your presser like covered in mayonnaise? Like, delightful. So that's the thing.
I'm sure his wife was like, "No, you don't get a post-game kiss until after your shower."
It just gives me the shivers. I mean, I love Duke's mayonnaise. It's pretty great. A couple things. I did this yesterday. I try to do this briefly before every show, just so you guys know my perspective. It drives me nuts when folks have other interests and other things going on, and they don't tell you that when they're talking on the radio or writing columns. And I try to be really clear about that. So my day job, the thing that I do that takes up the most of my time is I work with a company called Thanks they're off Franklin Square. It's growing your business with gratitude. It's real easy. It's sending Uber, Starbucks, whatever for the business relationships in your life. You can say, oh, hey, here's coffee for a week. Thank you. I appreciate you. At first, when I didn't think it was actually a business model because it's literally growing gratitude in business. It's basically helping you build your relationships. Like we've been talking about, relationships really matter. That's what Thanks does. If you've ever wondered what's up on the second floor above the buildings in Franklin Square, well, Thanks is up there above Ruby Sunshine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Right there. Okay.
Right,
I know
right
exactly
there.
where
Yeah.
that's at. Yep.
So-
That's
so,
cool.
You know, come and see us, say hi. That's where I spend most of my time. I'm also on the editorial board of the Tennessean, and I'm a columnist over there. Yeah, I know. It's wild. There's a conservative that writes things. I read things too, but I read them to write, and I talk about, hopefully, content and topics that are interesting to you. If you got ideas, you can message me at dcameronsmith on Twitter. I love it when you guys give me ideas on, hey, can you talk about this? Can you write about this? Or you hear something, you're like, hey, what is this? This seems weird. Some of the best stories that I'm able to write about and talk about come from you guys. So please give me that. I also write over at AL.com based out of the Birmingham News. I've done that for years. And I fill in on talk radio. That's kind of the mix of what I do. And oh yeah, I'm a partner in a media company too. I stay busy. Basically,
Yeah.
I do.
You've got a lot of things going on.
I do family things and work. That's
Lots of it.
That's my goal. It keeps me out of trouble. I'm just occupied most of the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
And that's what I love. I coach. I coach youth football over the Nolensville Panthers.
Go
Love
Panthers.
those guys. I'm wearing my Nolensville Wrestling Club hoodie right now.
You're decked out.
It's youth sports are awesome, and I
They
encourage
are.
everybody to go coach and mentor and hang out. And oh yeah, and we're a foster family, and so we do all that stuff too. Like we are Wild Crew. We want to have a good run through this thing we call life, and want you guys to have the same. But I want you to know where I'm coming from. It matters a lot when I start talking about these things. Where to go first? Probably Nikki Haley and the racism. Don't play the game, folks. Don't play the game. Because let's do something real obvious here. Nikki Haley not liking people with brown skin. That would be kind of awkward, right? And I think what happens here is the media, and I mean the industrial media complex, gets out there and says, you didn't say the right thing. And she didn't. It was a gaffe. I want to be clear about what she said. She basically kind of did word salad on, was slavery the cause of the Civil War? First of all, this is not difficult. The laws pertaining to slavery were absolutely one of the, if not the biggest driver for the Civil War. Full stop. The idea that is what we should base our presidential decision making on is your take on the causes of the Civil War is ridiculous. But this is what happens to Republican candidates and doesn't happen to Democratic candidates. The media tries to play gotcha and says, hey, here's a question about a thing completely disconnected from the office of which that you're running for. That again, she should not have had a gaffe. This is a simple question to answer. Of course, slavery was a driver for the Civil War. Next. Like, that's the way you handle that question. And she just, again, these guys are, I'm not going to make excuses for her. She should have gotten it right. But it's not something that people are like, well, I'm looking at inflation, I'm looking at immigration, the driver for my decision as to who to vote for president is, do they have a complex understanding of the causes of the Civil War? Like, this is a historical fact. You can look back and you can answer these questions definitively. The gotcha moment, you just don't play. You don't mess around with this stuff because the media is just looking for a sound clip. It's in her response. She did not mention slavery. It was, well, the Civil War was about what you can do and can't do. Well, the thing that you can and can't do was hold slaves. Like, that was a big part of it. The lion's share of it, in fact. And this is the bludgeon that the media will now use for a cycle to say, you know what? Nikki Haley may be a racist. She may be. We don't know. Big if true. But just based on her good grief, folks. I mean, does anyone really believe that Nikki Haley's a racist? No, we don't start there. We don't say, hey, you know what? She seems like a racist. No, she doesn't. Could she have answered that question better? Of course. But this is what we do, or I should say the media does to Republican candidates. It's the age-old question of, why do you beat your wife? Well, I don't. Well, are you calling us a liar? Like, that kind of thing, right? It's designed to tangle you and create this weird, uncomfortable situation. When I was driving in this morning, that's all we were talking about anywhere was that Nikki Haley, she may be a racist. We'll continue that conversation and the conversation about Jesus the Palestinian after the break. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
And we're going to tell you about the potential for snow. Also, millions of Tennesseans are on the move ahead of the new year. And Gypsy Rose Blanchard, a free woman. These stories and more at 9:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back, folks. Appreciate you being here. I see you on the Super Talk text line. In between breaks, I try to get over there and respond to you guys and have the back and forth. So we'll definitely do that. It's a little bit hard when I'm trying to talk and type, and I'd start to sound weird, and nobody likes that. So we're talking about Nikki Haley's gaffe. Again, the right answer for Republican candidates when questioned about anything related to the Civil War, the institution of slavery, anything like that, is racism and especially the institution of slavery are unmitigated evil, and we should obviously oppose and reject them. And the Civil War, we can say all the nice, rosy, fluffy stuff we want, but it was driven heavily by slaveholding states wanting to maintain that status. I mean, that's it. You don't have to keep going, and you don't have to be a history professor. Just say that and stop. Because when you start getting into word salad and hedging, because I understand, I am a student of history, but I'm not a history professor. I can talk about the Civil War with competency because I've researched it and written about it a lot. But it would be easy with me to even have a gotcha moment. But here's what Nikki Haley said. I'll just read it as opposed to playing the clip. The question was, what do you think the cause of the Civil War was? She said, and I quote, "I think it always comes down to the role of government and what the rights of people are. And we will always stand by the fact that I think the government was intended to secure the rights and freedoms of the people. It was never meant to be all things to all people. Government doesn't need to tell you how to live your life. They don't need to tell you what you can and can't do. They don't need to be a part of your life. They need to make sure that you have freedom." She didn't mention slavery, so that was the wrong answer. And I would agree that it's probably the wrong answer. I think it's very hard to explain, to answer that question.
Yeah.
The problem for the political class, I'll let you in on a little secret, because I've coached politicians, I've learned from politicians, I've done a lot of comms work. They pivot, right? When they get a question they don't want to answer, they pivot to something that they actually want to say. Well, sometimes there's a question you need to answer, and you need to just answer the dang question. When he says, what do you think, Mac asked me, what do you think the cause of the Civil War was?
Cameron, what do you think the cause of the Civil War was?
There are slaveholding states that wanted to continue that practice and other states that did not, and that was the majority driver. There were other factors like states' rights beyond just slavery, who got to decide what, and the strength of the federal government. But yeah, slavery was the major driver for the Civil War.
Bingo.
Sweet.
That's it.
Whee!
Ding, ding, ding. Yeah.
And then, if they continue to try to like drag you back and say, look, I've answered your question.
Yeah.
I'm not a history professor. We can, that information is widely available, and folks have debated all of these things, and there's quotes and information. I'm not here to parse all that out, but I can tell you that racism is wrong, and I can tell you that the institution of slavery is wrong. Do you have any more questions?
Mm-hmm.
And then the answer is always yes, right? Everybody always has
of course.
Well, have you considered that maybe you're evil? And this is the game that we end up playing. So you should have your stock answers to this stuff, and you should practice them if you're a politician until you don't blink when you say them. Because guess what? You're going to get something about racism, slavery, the Civil War. You're going to get something about LGBTQ plus rights. You're going to get something about Israel and Palestine. You kind of know where you're going to be targeted. Guess what?
Button.
You know what Nikki Haley has crushed in terms of her response? The abortion question. She has been genuine and authentic on that. And it's frankly the type of response that more Republicans need to figure out, because she knows what she thinks on the issue. And sometimes if you don't know what you think, you should just not talk. You should say, I'd like to think about that a little more.
Wow, that's a concept.
Right.
And knowing everything?
Yeah,
what?
Yeah. And the you got to be able to stand and deliver. You got to be on your feet. And I know, because I've seen it. And I can, when you've been in the arena and you can see how people have been trained, you see the poor advice that they're getting. Ron DeSantis got this in spades of, you should do this, you should do that, you need to be more friendly, you should try smiling. Dude, you look insane, like a psycho killer when you try to smile. So you shouldn't smile. You should just stand there and be like, I am the stoic Ron.
Stoic, yeah.
Right. Like be that guy. And some of the bad advice, like try to smile more. I can hear 20-something staffers say, people don't find you very likable. You should do this. And then he's like, oh, okay. And then he goes out there and he says this like gnarly face. It's like, And you can't hear that on the radio, but you can see it if you're online. It ain't good.
It was
folks.
gnarly. It's not good. No, you don't want that.
Not good. And I think that learning not to play the game when the stage is set for you to or I should say the plank is extended from the ship and somebody's saying, go walk it. You should just say, no. I have the answer. I've answered your question. Don't do a Corinne Jean-Pierre where you're just like, I'm offended that you question me. Like, you have to have answers. But short, sweet, to the point, move on. And so now Nikki Haley is going to be, her saving grace will be probably that Donald Trump will come in when he should just let her twist and dangle and try to clean this up. he'll probably come in and say something that's more wild.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
she'll be like, yeah, well, see, he said a thing. But other than that, like DeSantis, anybody who's sort of kind of still in this should just let Nikki Haley hang there waiting, trying to work her way out of this. But again, this isn't a hard one to clean up. You just need to be real clear and say, I had pivoted to kind of another question and I want to answer this with clarity. This is the answer. We're done. Let's go. Because once you start apologizing, and give Donald Trump some credit here, once you start apologizing for the way you answer questions and not answering it according to the appropriate leftist media orthodoxy, you're done. Like, you're just going to dig and dig and dig, and they're never going to let you up. We got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to the Chris Hand Show on Super Talk 99.7.
"9:30 on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Right now, we've got a 42-minute delay, travelers. This is going to be 24 eastbound through Clarksville. It is stop-and-go traffic. Stefano DiPietro with the timeline for snow.
So the time we're eyeing up here is still Friday through the day and into Friday evening. This is not just going to be a snow event, but there will be some rain that ends up mixing into some spots as we work our way through the afternoon. Little to no accumulation across most of the mid-state. We get to the higher elevations, could see up to about an inch.
Got the full forecast in 2 minutes. Today, one of the busiest travel days of the year. Channel 4's Joylyn Bukovac says you'll have lots of company.
2.7 million Tennesseans are expected to travel 50 miles or more for the holidays, and we have not seen this many people taking road trips since 2000. So that's 23 years ago.
Gypsy Rose Blanchard, the Missouri woman convicted in the murder of her mother, Dee Dee, back in 2005, is a free woman after being released from prison this morning. Now 32 years old, Gypsy says she was made to believe she was severely ill, underwent numerous surgeries, even had a feeding tube and used a wheelchair. The case was turned into a successful TV series on Hulu in 2019 with Patricia Arquette earning an Emmy for her portrayal of Dee Dee Blanchard. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Hi, I'm Paul Winkler. Have you ever thought about why we invest in the stock market? Well, you often hear because we want to protect ourselves from inflation. Well, what is inflation? It's prices going up. Who's raising prices? Companies. What do you own when you own stocks? You own the companies raising prices, so it helps protect us from that. The other thing is this. Think about the most successful people you know. They're typically business owners. And you get to be a business owner when you invest in the stock market. Now, if we think about the stock market, a lot of people worry about, well, what if the stock market drops and it never comes back? Well, this is another thing that I like to explain to people. If the stock market goes down and it never comes back, what does that mean? That means that earnings went down and they never came back up again. So earnings went down. If earnings go down, what else goes down? Taxes go down. If taxes go away, what else goes away? The government goes away. If the government goes away, the FDIC goes away. So think about it. Everything is built on the stock market. That's why I don't ever worry about the stock market going down. Everybody has the same goal in mind when stocks go down. Get it to come back up because we got to get earnings to come back up. Now, you have two things at your control to get earnings to come back up. One is sales. We can change what we're selling or sell more of whatever we have if we can. And if we can't do that, we can reduce our expenses. And that's exactly what companies do. You'll notice that they lay off people when things get bad, and hence that is why the stock market has recovered from every downturn throughout all of history. Now, if you want to learn more about our approach to investing in financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call or call 615-851-1950.
Nikki Haley's gaffe and the fact that once you start playing this game of getting the right answer on what were the causes of the Civil War? You need to be smart enough to know that you need to be short and pithy and to the point. and you need to know what they're trying to pull out of you. And I see you guys over on the Super Talk text line, and you guys are obviously students of history. So you know that it's more complicated than the simple answer that I gave Mac. That's true. That's also a terrible strategic play to answer that question on a hot mic with it's complicated. You cannot do that politically. Welcome to 2023, where you have about 5 seconds to make your point. And to be real clear, you guys are right on the Super Talk text line. The moral issue of slavery was not what sort of ignited the Civil War. However, the economics of slavery and the political control of the federal government as America expanded to the West, oh, heck yeah, that drove a massive amount of the conflict that ultimately ignited, and a lot of Americans died in horrible ways. And so I get you. You know, for a historical debate, I think it's great to have, well, what was the role of the institution of slavery? What were the political dynamics at play? What were and essentially the dividing line is slaveholding states. What were their concerns about the realities of the Industrial Revolution and how it might benefit the North versus them if, for example, you couldn't take enslaved Americans to new states? There were a lot of discussions around those issues that are great for historical debate that on a political stage in a town hall you should not engage. It's not because they're not important. It's just because you need to understand the context. This is not a favorable question. This is not hey, I think you're interesting. Tell me about your economic policies. Like, what's the role of free markets versus government regulation? This is a gotcha question. It's what it's designed to be because, you know, frankly, the president's perspectives on the causes of the Civil War largely irrelevant to how they'll perform as president. You can perform perfectly as president and not have very strong thoughts on what were the actual driving causes of the Civil War, Vietnam, past events. You should be a student of history. You should learn and think through. But the idea that everybody has a strong thought on everything is ridiculous. That's not real. And so, and you're talking to an opinion columnist who gets paid to write about his opinion. And there are days where I just don't people are, well, you should write about this. You should talk about this thing because in San Francisco, a transgender man punched a orangutan in the face. I don't even begin to know how to have thoughts about that thing. It's just things happen. And that's one of the phenomena of modern life, right? Like, we're now in a situation where everybody's expected to have an opinion about everything, and if you do, it will fry your brain. Like, and I've done this with my parents and with other folks, I'm like, disconnect. You can't be on Twitter all the time. You can't be on cable news all the time. It fries your brain because everything's breaking, and the only thing that's actually breaking is your brain. It's a big problem. It's a massive problem for everybody that that gets caught in this sort of perpetual cycle of, well, there was a koala crossing the road in Australia because there was a wildfire that was caused by climate change. And okay, cool. Like, save the koala, man. But like, otherwise, chill out because I live in Tennessee and don't have like super thoughts about this. Okay. The other one that I want to get to this hour, and we'll probably end up talking about this one for a while, is Jesus the Palestinian. So y'all saw this clip. The priest gets on cable news and basically says, well, you know, Jesus was a Palestinian. You know, facts matter. They really do. And this is a narrative designed to suggest, well, you know, Jesus was not necessarily Jewish. Yeah, he was. Like, what in the world are we talking about here? Like, whether you support a state of Palestine or not, That is a policy decision that you can make. But the idea that Jesus was actually a Palestinian, no. And we need to understand the history here because, and take notes on this, folks, because when I say take notes, jot it down, think about it, because you're going to be asked about this. People are going to say this kind of stuff, and we need to be real precise about what we mean. First of all, let's be real clear that Jesus of Nazareth was Jewish. According to Luke 2:21, he was circumcised on the 8th day, like all other Jewish boys. He attended synagogue. That's Luke 4:16. Jesus was referred to as a rabbi over in Mark 10:51. I pulled up these so I could give you these. Jesus' last meal was, anybody know? A Passover Seder. That's what it was. This is Jesus as quintessentially Jewish. And I understand that, we're like, well, obviously he was a Christian. Well, no, he wasn't. He was Jewish. Now, obviously, Christian faith departs from Jewish faith in that we believe that Jesus was also God. He was the Messiah. The Jewish people do not believe that. That's fine, but that's where we there's a split in the road. But up to that point, Jesus as a man was definitely Jewish. And the term Palestine, does that sound familiar to any of you? Like, where would this name have come from? Anybody read the Bible? Y'all remember this Goliath guy? Goliath of Gath? Ring a bell? David and Goliath? Philistine. And that they live on the Mediterranean coastline there. Like Greece and Turkey were kind of where the Philistines hung out. So what people don't get is when he lived and he was there, he was in a Jewish kingdom too, Judea. Like, this is where he was. And what happened is things didn't go so well with the Romans. And y'all, those of you who read the Bible know that, Rome was in charge during the time that much of the Bible was written. But the Jewish people rose up, and I won't get into all the details, but they rose up against the Romans. And the Romans massacred and expelled the Jews from Judea and renamed it Syria Palestinia. Okay? I want you to understand that. That's in 135. Over a century after Jesus' death, which is probably between 27 and 33. So we're talking this side of Christ's life. And the new name, the name that the Romans came up with, Syria Palestinia, was designed to minimize Jewish identification with the land. It was literally to separate them and be like, oh, no. This was the Philistines' land. You Jewish people, Like, the Romans did that intentionally. It was not, it was a disassociative act. It was designed to say, this Jewish homeland, these kingdoms, this place where you are from, we are renaming it to disconnect you from it. And we're moving you out. And you can go through the historical diaspora, like when the Jews got cast out. And it's awful. And you get this sense of dread from the Jewish people of impermanence, of we're always going to be driven out. We're always going to be cast about. And then the establishment of a Jewish homeland with Israel, I believe that was 1948. Is that right? It's, maybe you do have a home again. Come back. And I think this idea that Jesus was somehow a Palestinian, that anyone would say that is just historically inaccurate. It doesn't mean that Jesus does not love the Palestinians. It does not mean that God does not care about the folks there, but this is just a matter of historical fact. You know, when the Roman soldiers who were basically mocking Jesus before he died, anybody remember what they said to him? Hail, King of the Palestinians? No, that's not it. Hail, King of the Jews. That's John 19:3. So, there's some overlap. Judea is a region that includes parts of today's West Bank. But the idea that Jesus was Palestinian is just not true. And I pointed out some of these historical facts to a friend who was challenging me on it because she'd heard me mention that on the air. And ultimately, I pushed back and said, that's just not true. And I explained what I just explained to you guys. And she said, well, why do you care? I'm like, because history matters, because the truth matters, because suggesting that the Jewish people do not belong in this area of the world, and if you listen to Hamas, they need to be eradicated and moved because they're colonizers. No, that's historically false. It's just not true. And we can argue whether it's good to have essentially a religious or ethnic state. I think the answer is probably not. You know, I think that having what we have in the United States is excellent. The government doesn't back an establishment of religion. It doesn't favor a specific ethnicity. I think that's the better way to do it. It's a more difficult way to do it in many respects. But it's a little rich to be like, well, a Jewish state can exist, but you can have Islamic states, of which there are many. I don't think that's a good idea either. But again, in that area of the world, that's not uncommon. And so I think we need to be historically accurate when we view the lens. We must view these current events through the lens of history, and it must be accurate. Because if it's not, we're going to have a skewed, funny version of current events. And I think this is where so many of the folks chanting free Palestine and we want a ceasefire and we want all this stuff. I thought it was very interesting that the last ceasefire was rejected by Hamas. And I must have missed the moral outrage of everyone being upset. Sadly, I know I didn't, because this isn't about ceasefire. It's not about peace. It is very much a one-sided affair. And I understand that makes some people mad. And I understand that this is a very charged emotional issue. And I think it's ridiculous what Hamas has caused. And the idea that we can't have peace, whether it's a two-state solution in Palestine, whether it's one, I think there's a road there where peace could be achieved. We've seen it historically, that those options have been out there. But it's really funny, the number of billionaires that have been made over this from the Palestinian side. The number of folks that a small group of folks have done quite well while millions have suffered. I think we need to be honest about that. And we need to know what in the world we're talking about. So don't let anybody sell you a bill of goods on this. Understand the history. This is out there. It is available. It is not hard to find. You don't have to take my word for it. But the history here hasn't changed for quite some time. And so know it, discuss it, and don't back down when people tell you something that's just false because it's politically popular. Not on this issue, not on any others. We got to take a break right now, but when we come back, we got plenty more to talk about. Mike Johnson and the appropriation status, immigration, and all the things about pornography that you didn't know. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
Drivers, you still have an 18-minute delay eastbound 24 through Clarksville. Snow could be on the way. 2 hours ahead of your flight might not be enough. And Gypsy Rose Blanchard, whose story became one of the most infamous cases of Munchausen by proxy in history and inspired a TV series, is a free woman. These stories and more coming up at 10 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
A lot of breaking of glass there.
Yeah.
I have edgy opinions, says this sound. I don't know about that. I'm Cameron Smith, and this is the Chris Hand Show. Dandy handy. I like it. I mean, you guys are pretty great. Chris is pretty fortunate to have an awesome audience with lots of thoughts on things who engage, even in this disorienting time between Christmas and New Year's where no one knows what day it is. And I want to say how bad it's gotten. Hopefully my wife's not listening. She was listening yesterday, and my wife, who is the orienting force in our home as to where we need to be and what we need to do, I have some basic working knowledge so that, like, I'm like the emergency lighting of the Smith family. She is the, like, master switch that has all the lights.
Yeah.
And she was like, yeah, I forgot what day it is. And I'm like, it's happening.
Oh, no.
Everyone is confused. No one knows what's doing. Some of you have thought, well, you know, we should try some of those weird gummies that people sell downtown. Why don't we do that? I don't know. We're both off work. Don't. Don't do that. I don't do that. I had a friend, been a friend my whole life, say that they thought they would be a little edgy, and they got some gummies, and then they couldn't move for like a day and a half, and they felt awful. And I'm like, well, you deserve that. You deserve that, because that's thankfully my wife, an air traffic controller, is like, that seems dicey.
We're not doing that.
Yeah. If you're buying gummies from a guy named Fast Eddie, you probably shouldn't eat them.
Steer clear.
Yeah, steer clear. But yeah, nobody knows what time it is. Nobody knows what day it is. Nobody knows what's happening. I walk in today and I see Joan Jones, who's filling in for Matt Murphy, sitting there, and I'm like, crap. I missed the show.
It's over.
It's over. And I knew I was here on time. I was here in plenty of time.
Max in there alone doing a sports show for 3 hours.
Yeah, I'm so confused. And she is a delightful, and I want to be real clear about this. I love Matt Murphy. He's one of my dear friends, and I've known him for 1,000 years. He's also kind of a radio savant. And what I mean by that is Matt can just kind of roll in and be like, let's do radio. And as he goes, he has a notepad where he kind of takes notes and jots things down. So he knows the next segment, kind of what he's going to talk about. And really amazingly capable of engaging his audience in factual knowledge from years of doing it and being in the industry. Joan wants to fill in for Matt so well that she's here doing show prep while I'm on the air. And so I want you guys to know that, you know, when she's on the air filling in for Matt, she's done the homework, man. She is engaging and trying to make sure that you guys are informed and educated and engaged. And so that's a big deal. And I just want to let you know on that and brag on her. We don't know each other that well, but I was thoroughly confused and impressed when I came in and saw her sitting there. I'm like, what are you doing? And then I felt like my 15 minutes of prep was possibly inadequate. I write columns. I read things and know stuff.
Yeah, you know some stuff. It's
I don't
okay.
know. A couple of you guys have asked, who was it that was saying that Jesus was a Palestinian? And this was on CNN, Father Edward Beck. It was generally a Christmas fluff piece, but he said, I think the message of Christmas is that God enters into it with us and we're not alone in it. What I'm so struck by is the story of Christmas is about a Palestinian Jew. How often do you find those words put together? A Palestinian Jew born into a time when his country was occupied, right? They can't find a place for her to even give birth, his mother. They're homeless. They eventually have to flee as refugees into Egypt, no less. I mean, you can't make up the parallels to our current world situation right now. It's a positive sounding message, other than the fact that Jesus was not a Palestinian. He just wasn't. He was not. So to kind of connect that and suggest that, for example, there are a small number of Jews that live in Palestine. There are a small number, like 1 to 2% of the population is Christian. There are other ethnicities that live in Palestine than just Arabs. However, suggesting modifying history and being like, well, Jesus, the Palestinian Jew. I'm like, no, just a Jew. It was a Jewish kingdom. He was a Jew. That's the story I'm responding to. And again, it's designed to be a convenient political narrative. Listen, folks, do not engage in political narratives that distort reality, that distort history. And when you see them, call them out and just say, no, that's just not true. Because truth needs to prevail. Truth must prevail. And that's a hard thing in today's culture because, man, we want so many things to be so true, and they're just not. So you get to decide, what side do you want to be on? Side of truth or the side of a lie? It's a tough decision that we've got to make day in and day out. We got 2 more hours of the Chris Hand Show. I'm Cameron Smith, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
Ten o'clock on the dot this Thursday morning. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. That has grown to a 31-minute delay now. If you are 24 eastbound through Clarksville, it is stop and go. Here's Stefano DiPietro on the potential for snow we've been telling you about.
There will be, but it's not going to accumulate in a lot of areas. The main areas of concern are going to be the higher elevations of the Cumberland Plateau. A lot of areas aren't going to see much more than some passing flurries or a brief snow shower. I mean, some of us are not even going to get a dusting out of this. And actually, some areas will see some rain mix in.
Full forecast coming up in 2 minutes. Today is going to be one of the busiest travel days of the year. I know we've been saying that since Halloween, but Channel 4's Joylyn Bukovac says an estimated 2.7 million Tennesseans are going to be driving 50 miles or more to their New Year destination.
And when you're out driving, keep in mind, even though TDOT has paused highway construction for the holidays, you still need to obey those construction zone speed limits. This is very important. Speeding through them could get you a ticket costing $250 to $500, even if there's not workers present.
We've been talking to airport employees over the past couple of days, and they tell us at Hartsfield, Jackson, and any of the big metro areas, it's probably not enough to have just 2 hours leeway. You need to get there upwards of 4 hours before your flight in order to be safe. Gypsy Rose Blanchard, the Missouri woman convicted in the murder of her mother, Dee Dee, back in 2005, if free after her release from prison this morning, is free, I should say. While her case remains controversial, ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer says Gypsy's completion of 85% of her 10-year sentence, she's gone through the necessary steps to achieve this early release.
She clearly must have gone before a parole board, and they found that she was not a danger to herself or the community, and she must have done pretty well while incarcerated. So she'll serve the rest of her time on parole for that remaining 10 years, or about a year and a half, 2 years.
Her story inspired a popular series on Hulu. The now 32-year-old Gypsy Rose claimed her mother made her sick to the point she needed a feeding tube and a wheelchair so her mother could prey upon the sympathies of Good Samaritans. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Really helps if I turn the microphone on when I start talking. It's that kind of Thursday, folks. Happy Friday Eve. Cameron Smith filling in for Christopher Hand on the Chris Hand Show. He's fortunate. You guys are a great audience. Engage on the Superdog text line, 615-737-9986. I'm loving the vulnerability that y'all are expressing right now in the second hour of the show. 8212 said, parenting between Christmas and the New Year is basically just repeatedly asking your kids if they showered or eaten any real food, but ultimately not following up to see if they actually have.
That's great.
Is true. Right now, my offspring, they're responsible for their own laundry, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Wow is the thing. Wow's the thing.
I never did my own laundry.
Hayden, who's in yesterday, is also responsible for his own laundry. It does not go well.
Full body sweatsuit every day.
Matt Kinsey, he rolled in his new. So, okay. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of Fabletics, but it's just basically like athletic gear and stuff like that. It's cool. Like it. They sold a onesie. And I'm talking, it is a sweat top connected with sweatpants. And that's what it is. And it was like heavily discounted. It was like $20. And so I was like, I'm going to buy one because this will be funny to wear around the house. And my wife will be like, what are you doing? So I get this onesie, and I'm wearing it. And Hayden comes up to me and he's like, Dad, what is that? And I'm like, it's a sweatsuit onesie. It's just this big gray blankety thing.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's amazing. Like, that was all he wanted for Christmas after then. So then I go back, and the one I had, they were sold out of almost all of them, but they had like one. There were like 3 left. I got one in the Hayden size, and Max saw it yesterday. He has been wearing that onesie as default clothes since Christmas. He's like, yeah, I don't think I have any clean pants. I'm going to put the onesie back on.
Onesie's good to go.
I mean, that onesie's skanky right now.
No clean shirts?
And
onesie.
My wife is actually really smart about this. She basically forces the issue. She's like, hey, so that mountain of clothes in your closet is where your clothes, they're not clean. And he's like, yeah, that's true. And she's like, did you put up all your clean clothes last time? Because I know you did a lot of laundry. And did you do that? And that's the kind of noise Hayden made. And I think what happened is Hayden has clean clothes buried under the dirty clothes.
And now you can't really wear those.
Well, look, Mac, there's rules here. You can wear anything under the top layer of
not
that.
direct contact.
So there's a hamper.
Of course.
So obviously you try to do the least amount of laundry possible. So that's how you fix it. But Hayden's working through that today. But I feel this conversation of, hey, because I was going around to the boys like, you good? And that was what I was asking them, because they're kind of in that malaise where it's like, we went outside and we rode bikes for a while. We dug a hole. Where was the hole? We don't know. We great.
Awesome.
We got some firewood. Okay, cool. Where'd you get it from? The wood place. Okay, so are the neighbors missing any trees?
Yeah, exactly. Do they have holes in their yard?
Right. It's an awkward time. It's okay, and it's awkward, but it's okay. And I just want you guys to know that I'm there with you. We can soldier through. After this, after I get off the air, I'm going to go to the Lifetime Gym. I'm going to work out. I'm going to be there. If you want to come hang out over there in Franklin.
Lifetime's so nice.
Yeah, it's cool people gym. I am not one of the cool people. I'm the weirdo that's like, I'm going to write a column down here and act like I'm going to go work out. And then I go upstairs and I'm like, okay, we're working out. And then I see like the girl next to me curling like 65 pounds. And I'm like, I am inadequate. I am not okay.
Dwayne The Rock Johnson puts up 315 and repping bench. It's like, all right, cool.
I'm gonna no. Hey, the one thing I do get, because I have gorilla dad strength. Like some of the young guys at the gym, when they're like, "Oh, that's a lot. That's a heavy bench press. Way to go, old man!" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm the old guy.
I'm that guy."
It's super awkward, and it makes me feel like. I'm happy that they're acknowledging the fact that, I am indeed strong, but it's the first time in my life that it's been very, very clearly strong for my age.
Yeah,
They're
it's not.
like, man, you're throwing that 225 bench press around like it's nothing. Good job, old man.
Good job.
I'm like, this is objectively a lot of weight for anybody.
You're like,
What
whoa.
What are you doing? And then I remember I am old, and it's okay, and I don't have to prove anything to the young people. But it is, they should have dad hours. Where the
where
dads
it's
go.
just-
It's just dads only. They have what's the lady gym, Curves?
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like, this is a gym for ladies, so you don't have to deal with dudes gawking at you. Well, same, but for dads.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, this is loaf or whatever it is. It's like, we kind of want to be in good shape-ish.
Just you and a bunch of middle-aged men in Fabletic sweatsuits.
Yeah,
Go.
man. Let's go. I have a comfortable waistline. I'm happy. But I want to be physically engaged too. And I encourage all of you that exercise. Fantastic. You should do it. Okay. I want to get to the things that I keep saying I'm going to get to, but we always get distracted. Let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do. And this should get some of you a little fired up. That's fine. I think that'd be good for the discussion. So tell me what you think. Funding the government it's a basic function of Congress. And I know that folks say, well, we should just shut it down. No government. We're not going to do that. We've never done that successfully. What I mean by that is what we end up doing is shutting it down. I think the longest shutdown on record was in the Trump administration. It was, I believe, 29 days, somewhere around a month. And then you open it back up and you pay everybody. So the rationale is, if that's what we're going to do, is we'll have a little shutdown and then we'll pay everybody. We're basically giving government bureaucrats a paid vacation. That's what a shutdown is. So you don't actually save any money. You're not doing some good thing for conservatives. It's a political loser. And again, you're just giving a paid vacation to bureaucrats. Now, I agree with most of you that the idea of non-essential employees is ridiculous. If we can have non-essential employees, then why are they there? I mean, that seems pretty intuitive, right? And I think that civil service reform is maybe one of the most unsexy, essential things that we need to do. We need to basically say, do we need to do these functions? Can we do these functions more efficiently? Can we collapse them into existing structures? Because what government does is it propagates government. We just have government making more things, which sounds fine until you look at the math. You realize that we have insane debt, and how's that happening? I can talk about the drivers there, but the big issue is, let me roll that back a little bit. When I ran the House Republican Policy Committee for Republican leadership in D.C., I asked the Congressional Research Service, which is basically a research entity for Congress that helps answer a lot of the questions, because they have access to a lot of information. They know where to look. Very, very skilled research folks. It's a tremendous service. If you haven't ever, for those of you who are policy wonks and dorks out there like me, go to the Congressional Research Service. Those reports have been made public now, so it's not just, what would happen is congressional staff and members of Congress had access to this stuff. Then they would talk about it, and they'd look like geniuses. Well, it wasn't them. It was Congressional Research Service that was doing it. I asked CRS, I said, guys, can you give me an org chart for the federal government? I just want the org chart. This was at a time when I started to realize, maybe I have an aptitude for helping folks grow their businesses, make businesses more efficient, help get the right people in the right positions. And I said, well, we should probably know what's currently the case before we start trying to figure out how we can improve the federal government. No. That was the response I got. It was literally no. It was, well, it's complicated. There are these agencies and some of these are independent and blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, I just need an org chart. Like, the White House is at the top because it's the executive branch leadership. And then there's all these agencies under that. And they all report to, well, some of them report. Some of them don't technically report. Some of them, I'm like, guys, I feel like we're confused. And basically, after months of asking for a coherent, complete org chart, the answer was still no. They could get me a high-level one, but when we start to break down into sub-agencies and sub-agencies, and that it all fell apart because it got way too complicated, way too fast. And if you can't tell me what is currently the case, why can you tell me how much we need to pay for it? And that has been a mystery for me for years now, trying to understand how we can not know what's actually there and keep throwing money at it. I don't. This is mind-boggling. We must enact legislation that requires that we have at least an org chart, down to the sub-agency level. But that's where the devil's in the details, and that's where we get hosed. Is once oversight goes away. Like, we can talk about the border and Mayorkas and you're doing bad things, but like, what we really need to figure out is, well, what's the sub-agency that's responsible for this border wall construction, and what are they actually doing? And that's like one question at a Mayorkas hearing, right? So the level of oversight wanes precipitously the further down the non-existent org chart you go. And so I say all that to set up the conversation of how should we deal with funding the federal government. Here's what we've got so far, just so you know. The House has passed 7 of 12 appropriations bills. The Senate has passed 3. The House has passed Defense, Energy, Water, Homeland Security, Interior, Environment, Legislative Branch, MILCON, VA, State Foreign Operations. The Senate has passed Agriculture, MILCON, VA, and Transportation HUD. We've got some temporary extensions, but we don't have regular appropriations through both chambers. We have the tiered thing. I'm just going to call it a thing because I guess it's a CR, but it's like a tiered one that has a couple different dates. January 19th is the date that Agriculture, Energy, and Water, MILCON, VA, THUD, all must get another appropriations bill or a continuing resolution, or they will result in a partial government shutdown. Now, don't get scared about the government shutdown stuff, because basically the idea behind the different appropriations bills that cover the whole of government was that you could have one that got tangled in Congress, but the others, if not controversial, could go through. So you might have a quote unquote partial shutdown for like Department of Transportation, but Department of Energy would be fine, by way of example. The irony here is the House has taken a break until January 9th. So they got 8 working days to figure out what we're going to do on that one. Then the second tranche of basically the rest of the government's due February 2nd. So we're going back to the same place where we were of we've got to figure out how to fund government without these big omnibus bills and CRs and without having a massive calamity where Republicans say, we're going to vacate the speaker's chair and we're going to find somebody else that can do the things we want, and Democrats playing ball. We're going to talk about all of that when we come back on the other side of this break. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Chris Hand on SuperDog 99.7.
'24 eastbound is still stop and go through Clarksville. That's about an 18-minute delay. Cheaper gas prices ahead, predicted anyway. And the family of Legend Jones and attorney Ben Crump continue to call for justice after they viewed footage of what led to the teenage girl's death at a facility for troubled youth near Memphis. We'll fill you in on these stories and more coming up at 10:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
I feel like when this music comes on, I should be wearing aviators or something. I don't know why, but I just feel that. Mac, Mama Maury messaged in saying,
gosh.
Don't act like you don't know what Hayden is up to with the laundry.
Exposed.
She knows, Mac. Your mama knows.
I was playing all innocent. Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, the first layer. Oh, yeah, you don't want to. Yeah, I knew
Never
exactly.
heard of laundry. Never. Appreciate you guys on the text line and gals, including Mama More.
Of course.
615-737-9986. I'm Cameron Smith. You can find me at DCameronSmith on X, on Threads. I don't really know how to use Threads. I just post things, and it's really kind of creepy. Like, I don't really like or follow anything, but there's a lot of inappropriate content, and I'm like, so I think, like, the conservative-y libertarian types got left over on X, and then everybody else, because they were sophisticated and not craven like us, went over to Threads.
Went over the Threads.
And then made it, like, sexual and weird. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what is happening? This is the worst. I got, for work, I have to use social
You
media.
kind of have to do that. Yeah.
But it's terrible. I'm wondering what the algorithms see when they see me. They're like, he's not liking anything. He's just ambling along. Is he okay?
He's spewing random thoughts in the void.
Right. And I got rid of TikTok just because I just couldn't see any more scantily clad women shaking their parts at me.
That's all that happens on TikTok.
That's
it feels
it,
like
man.
Sometimes. Yeah, it's ridiculous. I should probably do the same.
I just was like, okay, cool. Like, I love some hydraulic press. Like, don't get me wrong. The hydraulic press content on TikTok is just clutch. But the rest of the stuff, I'm like, one, I'm getting old, and the scantily clad people appear to be 12. And so that's creepy.
Yep.
And so I'm just like, so I got rid of it. And then everybody else basically remakes TikTok, like Instagram, Facebook.
Exactly.
They have their own thing. And I'm like, I need to be able to not sit on the toilet and look at stuff. So, you can mock me, but all of you people do this.
All of us do that, yes.
And the doom scrolling before bed. It's like, I'm going to go to sleep.
It's
Let
bad.
me look at random things. And I'm sort of gradually pushing back and like, no, for 2024, I'm going to do the basics that I need to do to communicate and engage. And I want to engage with like actual people.
Yes.
But that's it. Like, I want to have conversations, not bot conversations. And I'm going to work. I actually told folks over at Thanks that I'm going to do a better job in 2024 of actually having coffee and lunch with humans.
Okay.
Like, I'm going to plan it. Like, every week, I'm going to have at least 1 or 2 coffee and or lunch meetings with people that not only do I want to do business with, but people I want to develop relationships with.
Yeah, see how they're doing. Yeah,
Right.
Keep up.
Right.
Yeah.
Because this is actually, it's weird how work stuff like kind of gives you the capacity to kind of understand yourself a little bit. And with Thanks, it's like, well, we grow business with gratitude. Well, one of the really kind of interesting things is you got to have relationships to be grateful for. So if you never leave the office and you never go talk to any humans, it's real hard to have relationships that you appreciate. And so because of the nature of what I do with columns and radio and stuff like that, I talk to a lot of people. But I want to talk to more people. And I'm going to try to figure out how I can do it in a way that's like, I mentioned I was going to Lifetime after this and just hang out. But to find some hangout places where it's like, if you want to come and continue the conversation, you should come here and we should do that thing.
Yeah.
And maybe we will drink coffee. But the point is, get together with real people, because I think the value of being able to see the body language and the back and forth matters. And that's how you build relationships. And so I'm going to do it. I'm going to do that better. And yes, Jason, on the Super Talk text line, actual people. What? What are these you speak of? Sounds dangerous. What if they bite you? And they might. I live with 4 that might at any given time. And I have my 12-year-old is, he likes to touch my beard. He thinks it's so, he's like, Dad, this is crazy.
Mystifying.
Like, this is weird. You have all this hair coming out of your face. And I'm like, yeah, I do. And you touch it a lot. And, I want to engage my sons, but that one, That's tough. So if we get together in person, like let's have appropriate space. You know, don't touch the beard. Don't come up and be like, let me just run my hands through your man beard. That's reserved for my kids and my wife. You can't do that. But other than that, I think it's pretty safe. And what side of TikTok? Matt wants to know what side of TikTok I'm on. I don't know. Are there sides? Are there like teams, like red team, blue team, like G.I. Joe? You get lasers.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't. Is there? I'm clearly on the dark side of TikTok where all of it's people doing crazy science experiments, hydraulic press, and inappropriate shaking of bodies. And some what really gets me is I get both the inappropriate shaking of bodies and then the men inappropriately shaking their bodies, making fun of the inappropriate.
Like, the memeing, you're like, this is ironic.
That's the daddest thing ever. If I had a daughter and she was doing that, I would totally do the same thing to be like, not until you stop, honey. But that's just me. I want to get, it's that weird time between, and we got to take breaks and do all kinds of things, but we'll come back. We'll talk about funding the government. Y'all can yell at me about how we need to shut everything down, and I'm probably not going to yell back because I just don't have the energy, but who knows? I might. So we got to take a break. Ooh. This is the Chris Tan Show, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
$29-minute delay now. Stop and go traffic 24 eastbound through Clarksville. One more day before the chance for snow. Full forecast in 2 minutes. Cheaper gasoline ahead. Gas prices are going to fall in 2024 for a second year in a row, according to Gas Buddy. And the family of a Memphis teenager calling for justice after seeing videos of events leading up to her death. Attorney Benjamin Crum is representing a Legend Jones family.
These videos paint a very disturbing picture, a very troubling picture.
Witnesses claim 17-year-old Legend Jones was brutally assaulted, battered, and choked last month at a place called Youth Villages. That's a national group home just outside of Memphis that deals with at-risk youth. The Tennessee Department of Children's Services is investigating the death. So is the Bartlett Police Department. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Hi, I'm Paul Winkler. Have you ever thought about why we invest in the stock market? Well, you often hear because we want to protect ourselves from inflation. Well, what is inflation? It's prices going up. Who's raising prices? Companies. What do you own when you own stocks? You own the companies raising prices, so it helps protect us from that. The other thing is this. Think about the most successful people you know. They're typically business owners. And you get to be a business owner when you invest in the stock market. Now, if we think about the stock market, a lot of people worry about, well, what if the stock market drops and it never comes back? Well, this is another thing that I like to explain to people. If the stock market goes down and it never comes back, what does that mean? That means that earnings went down and they never came back up again. So earnings went down. If earnings go down, what else goes down? Taxes go down. If taxes go away, what else goes away? The government goes away. If the government goes away, the FDIC goes away. So think about it. Everything is built on the stock market. That's why I don't ever worry about the stock market going down. Everybody has the same goal in mind when stocks go down. Get it to come back up because we got to get earnings to come back up. Now, you have two things at your control to get earnings to come back up. One is sales. We can change what we're selling or sell more of whatever we have if we can. And if we can't do that, we can reduce our expenses. And that's exactly what companies do. You'll notice that they lay off people when things get bad, and hence that is why the stock market has recovered from every downturn throughout all of history. Now, if you want to learn more about our approach to investing in financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call or call 615-851-1950.
interesting. Caller 111163 says, I guess this was before me, stop saying Holy Jesus and Good Lord and stop saying like. I'll do my best, but like, it's real hard.
It's too easy.
What I'm still trying to understand the sides of TikTok. Several folks have said there are sides. I don't know about these sides. I don't know about TikTok. I don't have TikTok anymore. Talking about Mike Johnson and the appropriation status. You know you want to giggle every time I say Mike Johnson. See? I knew it. I live in a house with boys.
You know.
I know. If you know, you know. And we're running out of time to do this funding. And I know the whole Kevin McCarthy thing seems like 100 years ago. But the row, if you recall, was one, going to Democrats for help on funding government and spending priorities. Two, an omnibus or CR mechanism to fund the government. Mike Johnson secured the speakership by saying, we're going to pass individual appropriations bills. We're going to break up federal spending. We're going to do this differently. No more omnibus, no more CRs. He did this compromise thing that bought him a little bit of time. He's running out of time, and he's going to have 8 working days between the time the House gets back and January 19th when there has to be funding for a number of federal agencies. The problem is immediately after that, he's going to have the rest of the government up, and we're going to do this again. And Democrats wanted to punt the issue, I think, through the end of the year and into an election year to make a point about Republican governance. Because if Republicans can't get on the same page and can't figure out what leeway they're giving the speaker to fund the government, this is going to go incredibly poorly, incredibly quickly. And in case you're wondering, no, we're not going to indefinitely shut down the government. That's just not going to happen. I understand some of you would like that, and I get it. But that wasn't the reality under Trump. It's not been the reality under any president. And so we're going to do this. The question is how. And it was Matt Gaetz, and we've heard others say, well, if the speaker doesn't break up the spending and do it in the different appropriations bills, then we'll make a motion to vacate the chair, and then we'll find a new speaker who will. Yikes. I just don't think, first of all, fine. If you wanted to kick out Kevin McCarthy and get rid of him, okay, I get that. I mean, he made too many compromises to different groups that just meant that it was going to be hard for him to hold on to the speakership. It's just a reality. It's true. The challenge for Speaker Johnson is he needs to be given at least a little leeway. My argument would probably be this fiscal year. So basically, whatever you have to do to get through this fiscal year in terms of appropriations, you're done. But then you got to start the process pretty quickly of moving the appropriations bills for the next year. Because we have not had what's called regular appropriations order in so long that I think it's going to take a long time. And what Mike has to do is navigate we must do it this way that we haven't done it forever with the crowd that's like, no, we don't want to do a million different spending bills. There's a lot of Republicans in Washington, if not a majority, that are fine with omnibus and CRs. One, it's easy to hide stuff in there. Two, you have the flexibility of saying, well, we voted for this, because we wanted these other things. So it gives you a little bit of political cover. I'm not arguing that it's good policy. I think the better policy is to break it up. I'm simply saying that there's a large cohort of folks that like it the way it is. That's the reason we keep doing it that way. So the question is, what are your Burchetts of the world, Congressman Burchett? What are your Chip Roys? What are other folks going to do? Are they going to say, no, we're going to lop off the head of the Republican leadership in the House again? Or are we going to give him a half measure and say, okay, well, we've broken it into two different pieces. Let's just come up with something that gets this done for this year, and then we'll move forward. I think that that's probably smart, because Republicans should want to get the funding issue out of the way so it's not a political issue for Democrats. Now, you shouldn't agree to priorities that you don't care about, but you absolutely don't want Democrats to point to Republican dysfunctionality in an election year. And so the idea of we're going to lock this down and we're going to shut down government, any shutdown is going to be a political hammer for basically be a political hammer for Democrats. You don't have to like it, but it's true. That's how Democrats use it every time. If it wasn't effective, they wouldn't do it. And so I think our choice has to be give Speaker Johnson a little bit of latitude. I also think that we've got to be real careful in tying things in the appropriations bills that don't match. Like tying Israel funding to cutting IRS expenditures for all those extra IRS agents. Like, okay, that can be an important goal to cut that spending, but I would much rather leverage spending on Israel to border security. I would much rather leverage funding for Ukraine to border security, because those make rational sense. If you're doing things that Russia doesn't like, then Russia may do things you don't like. And that, with a vulnerable border, could be a problem. If you're doing things that, for example, Iran doesn't like in supporting Israel, a vulnerable border would be a significant problem, right? And I think those things make sense. Those are good ties. The biggest problem with Ukraine and Israel right now is we don't have a plan. We don't. Now, we can argue about whether it's in our interest to offer military aid to Ukraine or to Israel. My point is, regardless of what we do, we must have a plan. Currently, we haven't. Joe Biden has been so weak on this that we don't even get to the point where we need to debate whether this is a good policy choice or not. It's what are we doing? What's the game plan here? I for example, and I've told you guys this, I think it is in our interest to keep Russia distracted. You know, Russia engages in malign activity in our elections, hates a Western democracy. They don't like our Republican form of government. They don't like our values. They are not our friends. And so they're going to do that stuff regardless. Holding ground in Ukraine and keeping them occupied, I do think it's in our interest. And we can debate that, but the bigger problem is, but what's the plan? Is it just indefinite engagement? Do we just send missiles and ammo and everything over there indefinitely? When have we accomplished mission? Is it when Putin's no longer the head of the Russian Federation? That could be a really long time. Is it when Russia stops and withdraws? Could also be a really long time. What is the game plan to ensure that we know what victory looks like? I don't like the idea of being entangled, even in something that I think is worthwhile, without a clearly defined plan. That's how you get Afghanistan. Is in these open-ended military engagements that we don't know exactly what we're doing. And I feel like Ukraine's an example of that. The same in Israel. Israel's an ally. It's a little bit of a different situation, but what's the game plan? What are we doing? They're doing stuff in Gaza. They're going after Hamas. What aid do we provide, and what's it for? And what's the expectation, and what do we get in return? Do we share intelligence information? What is the thing? Is it just we really like Israel, and so we just give them stuff? Again, that's fine, but what is the plan? What's the thing behind it? And I think as we look at funding the government and we figure out what are our priorities, we should expect that DOD, the White House, other folks come in and explain exactly what's going on before we fund the border or fund DHS. What's the game plan on the border? What are we doing? And if we don't have a plan, then why are we throwing money at it? And it shouldn't be like a light switch that government on or government off. That's why we split up the funding mechanisms. But I absolutely wouldn't support funding DHS right now without some clear answers. I would absolutely hold that one and say, wait a minute, I've got questions. I want to talk about this. And until you give me a clear plan of how you're going to use this money to secure the border, I don't think that we should fund it. Because funding millions of people coming across the border is not what your job is. In fact, it's the opposite. And so we're going to have a lot of questions that I'm trying to set this up because it's coming. We're going to have to deal with this. We're going to have to be pragmatists here. We're going to have to figure out the politics and the policy at the same time, and it's not going to be easy. We got to take a break right now. When we come back, I want to get to your questions, address some of the specifics here. I know it's a little bit of a nerdy conversation. Then we'll get to immigration, and then we'll talk about the crazy, crazy statistics on pornography that they're just going to blow your mind. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to The Chris Hand Show on Super Talk 99.7.
Still got stop-and-go traffic eastbound 24 through Clarksville. That's about a 16-minute delay. A second American now confirmed killed in the Hamas terror attack in Israel on October 7th. And Nikki Haley now trying to clarify that Civil War comment to a voter in New Hampshire. We'll tell you about these stories at more at 11 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back. Winding down the second hour of the Chris Hand Show. Got a lot of wild things happening over on the Super Talk text line. Somebody referred to me as a Valley girl, which I don't even begin to know how to respond to that.
Oh, because of the like thing? Because you were saying like, I guess?
I guess.
Gnarly.
Good gnarly. I like it. Let's see. I've got a recommendation for Red vs. Blue and action figure therapy on YouTube.
I saw that text, yeah.
I'll have to check that out. I'm very excited. Thank you for the suggestion, Nick.
Nick said maybe not around the kids, though.
Maybe not around the kids. That's always a good disclaimer. Shut it down. Shut it the XXXX down. Oh, we're being profane, but not.
Yeah.
It's like it's conservative profanity. I love that. We cannot afford it. So I want to address that argument real quick on shutting the government down and our ability to afford it. If we're going to shut it down and then give people back pay, then we don't save money. In fact, there's a lot of research out there showing that shutting down the government, in fact, costs us money because of the way we do it. To date, every time we've done this, we pay back pay. So we're basically paying for a bureaucrat vacation. If you support extra bureaucratic vacation, then you support shutting down the government. If you want to, one of the projects that I worked on was how can we reduce the size of the federal government's payroll through attrition, that basically once people retire, don't backfill the positions. Like, okay, that actually shrinks the government and saves us money because there's fewer positions that we're paying for. I think if we want to look at the non-essential employee role and say, how do we reduce this? All we got to do is say, we've deemed these non-essential positions. That doesn't seem like a thing that's critical to the functionality of government. You can try to fire them, but the civil service protections and things like that will just basically tie you up in courts for years. And so my suggestion is once the position is vacated, close it. Just don't hire it back. There's nothing to sue. You cannot... The lawsuit of closing a government position that nobody is presently in is, I don't even know who would have standing to sue to make that happen. So being strategic like that makes a lot of sense. Just saying, shut it down. Well, like it does sound cool. Yeah, shut it down. But it doesn't give you what you actually want. I want you to get what you want, which is not wasting money. Shut the MF government down and no back pay. Okay. If you want to do that, then you're doing something we've never done before. And the political class, the majority of the folks in D.C. don't have the appetite for it. So I hear you. But imagine that was you. I mean, we need to be honest about it. We don't need to eliminate the human component here, that people are in jobs. They depend on a paycheck to feed their families, keep the lights on, pay the mortgage. We know that. And so when you shut it down and you don't pay them, That has real consequences too. Again, if you want to shrink the size of the federal government, I am with you. And we can develop a plan to do that. But these shutdowns are not giving us what we want. They're just not. And they're a political win for Democrats. And you know who doesn't want to shut down the government and who doesn't want to reduce its size? Democrats. They don't want to do that. And so if they can use it to leverage it and be a win for them, they will. Randall in Lewisburg wants to talk about the government shutdown, and I think we should have that conversation. Randall, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
What you got?
Well, I just had a thought. I was wondering, do you keep track of the national debt clock?
I do. I've seen that thing, and I do it through a lot of the different budgetary tables, CBO, because I'm a nerd. But, yeah, what's up?
Okay, so you've been keeping track of the messages that they've been putting up and taking down there after a day or so at a time?
No, I haven't. Tell me.
Well, there's been several of them, but if you go and look at the one that is up there right now, there's a little box up there in the right-hand corner that you click on it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you kind of do some looking and evaluating of that whole picture, it might give you a little, I mean, to me, it kind of gives me a little bit of insight as to why maybe they're not getting anything done.
The secret window? Is that what we're talking about?
That's correct.
You're talking about the gold standard?
Correct.
Yeah.
If you look to the left there, you'll see some of those treasury notes and the valuations on them, and they're not normal.
Yeah, well, once you get disconnected from a gold standard, a lot of wild things happen. The problem is trying to go back to it creates all sorts of challenges. And when we have as much debt as we have, I mean, we've got a structural problem well beyond whether we're on a gold standard or not. It is, we are.
Oh, absolutely.
And so if we don't stop spending and actually reverse spending, we're toast.
Well, you see their message there, it says "Gone with the Wind."
Yeah, I did see that.
Okay. So there's a lot of implications in there, especially if you've been following, like this has been going on for a little while, some of the messages that they've been putting up and taking down, and it's all very interesting if you follow that stuff, but, you know, I'm just saying they might not have anything to work with.
Well, Randall, I appreciate the call, man, and it's something we got to talk about. We got to take a break right now. Mac is yelling at me, and when he yells at me, bad things happen. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Chris Hand Show, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories, and it looks like they're about to clear. And in fact, that situation there on 24 in Clarksville has disappeared from the board now. So it looks like things are moving again eastbound 24 through Clarksville at a normal pace. Full forecast in 2 minutes. A second American now confirmed killed in the Hamas terror attack in Israel October 7th. Kibbutz Nir Oz says 70-year-old Judy Weinstein was shot along with her husband, Gad Haggai, who was also murdered. Here's Britt Clinette in Jerusalem.
They were on their morning walk. It's something they do every single morning when they were shot and killed on October 7th. Their bodies taken back to Gaza. Their bodies still believed to be inside Gaza.
She's a triple citizen of Israel, the U.S., and Canada, and wrote and taught poetry, and was very much part of the community, and was born in New York. Election 2024, Nikki Haley, who's been rising in the polls in New Hampshire, is trying to clarify her Civil War comment to a voter at a town hall in New Hampshire when he asked what was the cause of the United States Civil War. This is part of her answer.
I think the cause of the Civil War was basically how government was going to run, the freedoms and what people could and couldn't do.
Well, the questioner responded that he was astonished she never mentioned the word slavery. Well, this morning, Haley told radio host Jack Heath, of course, the Civil War was about slavery. Gypsy Rose Blanchard, the Missouri woman sentenced to 10 years for the 2015 murder of her mother, has been released from prison early. She claimed her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard, preyed upon the sympathies of Good Samaritans by making her sick to the point that she used a wheelchair, a feeding tube, and underwent multiple surgeries that were later deemed to be unnecessary. Gypsy Rose told ABC's 2020 and 2018 that even behind bars, she finally felt free.
Over here, I feel like I'm freer in prison than living with my mom, because now I'm allowed to just live like a normal woman.
Prison isn't normal.
No, not for most, but for me, it is.
Now, so Gypsy Rose, now 32, was released from prison this morning at 3:30 in Missouri. Her case garnered national headlines, was even made into a streaming series on Hulu in 2019, with Patricia Arquette winning an Emmy for playing Dee Dee Blanchard in the series, which was called The Act. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
I wonder if Chris knows this sounds like an Enya song.
Enya?
Enya. I feel like it's going to be like, sail away, sail away, sail away. Like anytime now. Anytime. Welcome back. This is the last hour of the Chris Hand Show. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in. Be filling in tomorrow, too. We've got a cool show coming your way tomorrow. If I can persuade my teenager to roll out of bed and talk to us and give us the wisdom of a 14-year-old, it will happen. You got to hear from my 9-year-old yesterday, and it went shockingly well. But I think it's important to mix the family approach and some of those issues in with the political stuff, because it's easy to get kind of focused on the present political context and miss building for the future. And I think we have to do both. So a couple of you guys have made great points on the Super Talk text line, 615-737-9986. You don't have the certainty in the private sector. If you're a mechanic and nobody comes and brings their car in, guess what? You know, your operation suffers. This is the reality, is the private sector versus the public sector. You're not recession-proof in the private sector. If the private sector says your job is no longer there, it's gone. In the public sector, you have civil service protections and other things like that. The government may not have any money, but they can print more. And so I understand that. I think that's a fair point, that the reality is, hey, you want to take a government job in a shutdown culture? You may be affected by it. Cool. I won't even argue with you. But you're going to tell me that that's not going to happen when historically it's always happened. If it's always happened, that's what I go with. And I'm not saying it's the right answer. I'm simply saying in politics, more often than not, what we've been doing is what we do. Rare is the moment where leadership steps up and says, we're going to do it differently. We're not going to keep doing the dumb things. Use our spending trajectory as an example. If you look at the, and I'll do, next time I fill in, we'll do a show on a lot of the spending trajectory and what it means and how post-COVID we piled on and we did all this stuff. And now, even as we're quote unquote cutting back, we're still so far overboard in terms of our spending that it's insane. We should have gone back to pre-COVID spending levels. And in order to get our debt under control, we have to go further back than that. So we don't have a game plan here. There's no leadership. There's no nothing. So the shut it down crowd, I get it. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. And so if you want to shrink government, I'm telling you the ways that I've seen it effectively done are across the board cuts that affect everybody. I'm talking defense and discretionary. Just say, you guys have to have a deficit reduction plan. And if you don't, we agree that we're just going to cut 10% across the board. Everyone hates that. Every politician tries to get out of that after they've done it. We had that briefly, and it did have some success. The other way of doing it is like I'm talking about, through attrition. So you avoid all the legal wrangling and everything, and you just say, hey, these positions, we've deemed them non-essential, and so we're going to close them. Okay, boop, done. That's how you shrink government. And you got to be politically tactful and savvy in doing it, because some of these ideas, for example, take Senator Tommy Tuberville's stand on abortion policy by holding up a bunch of DOD folks that had nothing to do with the Biden policy. Flag officers and other folks that had earned new positions. And he, for a while, said, I'm going to hold my ground until the Biden administration blinks and changes their abortion policy. Then he said, well, I'm not going to do it anymore, with some minor exceptions. And then he voted for paying back pay to those military officers. My point is, even the quote-unquote more conservative guys are doing the back pay thing. So if that's what we're up against, that's probably what we're going to do. And so these shutdowns don't make sense. And so finding ways to shut it down, and by shut it down, I mean shrink government, is what we need to do. And 7114 mentions, without term limits, decreased spending will never happen. I actually don't think that term limits have a whole lot to do with it. It's just politicians able to throw out the goodies will always want to throw out more goodies. They never are going to say, well, I have a limited term, therefore I don't want to be known for throwing out the goodies. That's the hardest thing in government, is to not just flush money out the door. You know what people like is getting random checks from the government because of a virus. People love that. They do. Kevin makes a point, says, defense should never be cut. I'm sure we can find it in all the other crap programs that Dems love so much. Exactly. That's why it works. As you say, 10% across the board, everybody's ox gets gored as a backstop. Now, if y'all come up with a better plan that says, okay, we agree that discretionary spending should be reduced massively and DOD should be left alone. Okay. Then do it. And then you don't hit the 10% won't ever hit. 15%, whatever it is. But the idea that that's going to happen, it just doesn't. Right? Democrats say, well, why should we cut discretionary programs we care about? And you guys care about defense spending. Why? And you won't budge there. Why should we budge? I mean, that's kind of what it's broken out to is Democrats are like, we like all this discretionary spending. Republicans seem to like defense spending. And defense spending, in all fairness, there's a big difference in supporting our men and women in uniform and making sure that they have the best gear, the best weaponry, the best that money can buy, and supporting wasteful military spending. Because it is absolutely wrong to believe the DOD can't even be audited. So the idea that DOD is fiscally responsible or that, defense should never be cut, it doesn't even make any sense. Because as long as you equate every dollar spent on defense is merited because of our men and women in uniform, then you're not being intellectually honest. It's not fair. Because we have programs that don't do that, where equipment that piles up that never gets used by our men and women in uniform. We have military acquisition programs where we pay to make the thing, and then we buy the thing that we paid to make. I mean, if y'all may not realize it, but what happened with the COVID vaccine is basically a DOD acquisition strategy. It's pay somebody to make a thing and then buy it from them. It is incredibly lucrative if you can get those contracts, but that's how it works. And so negotiating better, making sure we have the best equipment at the best price, making sure it's stuff that our folks use, listening to our generals as opposed to the political class who are telling us what we need and where we need it and what bases we need and what bases we don't. Nobody wants base realignment and closure. I get it. I understand the politics there. But when you have Pentagon officials asking for another round of BRAC and you have the political class saying no, this isn't about our men and women in uniform. It's about political patronage. Call it what it is. But we have to have things like that, because if the answer here is we're going to cut all the spending that Republicans like, or we're going to cut all the spending that Democrats like, it just doesn't work. We have to just essentially say we're going to pick an amount, we're going to reduce the federal government by that, and if we can come to an agreement, great. But let's agree that if we can't agree, then everybody pays. I understand that might not be popular, but it can work. And then I promise you what will happen is everybody will talk about their program and how everyone's going to die and all the bad things that will happen if they have to suffer a 10% cut. Let me tell you something. My family's budget, if I can't handle a 10% cut in my family's budget, I have not planned well. And that's, again, I keep going back to it, it's a failure of leadership. Let's just be honest about what it is. The folks that we're sending to Washington tell us about all the bills they introduce and all the things they do, but they never solve the problem. When Republicans tell me how they're fiscal conservatives and they believe in reining in government, I'm all about it. When you get down to it, guess what? They've been just as bad as everybody else. It's just spending in a different direction. And so let's be honest. The political class has lied to us on this. If we want to get serious about it, if we want to rein in spending, we're going to feel the pain. I mean, imagine a steroid, bodybuilder, somebody that's roid raging out, and then you take away the steroids. What happens to that bodybuilder? It doesn't go well. We have so juiced our economy with government money that to just cut it off and say, nope, no deficit spending, it would just wreck our economy. That's the truth. So you got to have a plan for a gradual reduction over time. It didn't take us, I shouldn't say that. Because of COVID, man, we've dug a deep hole real fast. But a lot of it is dug over time. And you got to go back the other way. And the argument will always be, well, we're on all these roids. We're on these economic roids. Don't worry about it. We can't wean ourselves off. Well, you can. And there's a way to do it without withdrawals, but it's not fun. And that's the truth. And nobody likes the truth. So we keep living the lie, keep deficit spending, keep piling on our debt, and then we just magically hope it goes away, and then we yell at the other side about it. Yeah. Again, nobody's a friend of the truth. It's rough. We'll talk about this. We'll talk about the statistics you didn't know about porn. Have a fun little immigration game that we're going to do before that. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to The Chris Hand Show on Super Talk 99.7.
The military has made changes to the way sexual assault cases are handled. That and more coming up at 11:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Howdy, y'all. We only have a little bit of time left today. Time flies when you're having fun. Sometimes it flies when you're not having fun. I mean, it just seems to just go now.
We've had fun, though.
Yeah. I want to address some of the comments on the Super Talk text line. You guys are, again, excellent. Excellent. We'll play a guessing game with Mac.
Ooh,
Mac,
okay.
What do you think the DOD's budget is, or their budget request was for fiscal year 2023, Department of Defense?
For the whole year, I'm going to go, I'm going to overshoot this, aren't I? I'm going to go $500 billion.
$773 billion. That's what they asked for.
Okay.
I have to pull up the actual number, but assume we're talking in the ballpark, right? Guess what the net interest cost on the federal debt were for fiscal year 2023?
Oh, jeez. $2 trillion.
$659 billion.
Golly.
So this is net interest. This is like just the interest payment we're paying on our national debt.
Okay, gotcha.
Right?
Wow.
So think about it this way. Y'all have talked about, well, if we didn't do this or that, we could, spend more on the military. True. We will spend sometime within the next, my guess would be 4 or 5 years, more on our national debt service than we do on the Department of Defense. Like, just think about that. Already we combine several federal agencies and we spend more in interest payments. The whole problem is that we blow money out the door. And some of y'all made great points. Maybe we can have housing for military without mold if we audited the DOD and had some of the wasteful spending reallocated to things that better served our troops. And the idea that there's something magical here where the DOD can't ever have wasteful spending. I actually talked to the appropriations subcommittee that handles DOD when I was working on the Hill, and they actually told me that. They're like, we can't ever reduce spending. I'm like, what?
Whoa,
like
what?
Like never? Like, no, never. I'm like, well, wait a minute. You're telling me that the DOD is run like any other organization, sometimes better, sometimes worse, sometimes efficient, sometimes not. And we always have to just either spend the same or more? That seems kind of weird.
Jeez.
And that was, they were like, look, there's the political hit we take for reducing spending to the military is way worse than the fiscal hit of just spending more. I'm like, wait a minute. You're telling me that all these defense contractors, all these people that are making all the money off DOD, they get to just have like an impervious umbrella because of our men and women in uniform. That seems like really messed up. And I have a ton of friends and family that have served in the military, and I want to take care of them. Like the TRICARE benefits for veterans, things like that. Those matter. We should invest there. But when it comes to military contracts and it comes to outlays for defense systems and how we do that, like, we got to pay people for developing what we want. Like, I get that. Like, I understand how that works. But the idea that we could never reduce our outlays on anything or somehow become more efficient is silly. It's silly. Like, you wouldn't want to run a business that way. You wouldn't run a military that way. You don't want to run anything that way. Only in government is the idea we can only ever spend more. And then if somebody makes the argument that I'm making that, well, maybe we should be more efficient, maybe we should do this, then it's, why do you hate our soldiers? Why do you not support our men and women in uniform?
Are you not American?
Right. And so it's this perpetual loop, which we need to really think about as conservatives. Like, we want to support our men and women in uniform. We want them to be the best equipped military force on earth. I've heard so many of you talking about how can we want to do this. We want to make sure they're equipped. We don't like what we see in the depletion in the military and all the social programming that the Biden administration has done in the military. We want to focus them on being the best fighting force in the world. I 1,000% agree with that. I think that should be our objective. We can accomplish that objective by paying more attention and having more oversight over what we do. We absolutely should. And it's unfair to our men and women in uniform when we're like, oh, well, we've taken the parts for this plane and scattered them over all these congressional districts so that we spend all this money on a weapon system we no longer need, but for political reasons. That is political waste hiding under the umbrella of patriotism. And we need to just say no. Just say no. And I think that should be the expectation, yet a lot of our elected officials that are dealing with military spending, they have a one-way thing here. And I think we have to criticize everything. If we're doing this for the discretionary spending in these other agencies and the random government programs, we need to look everywhere. Turn over every cushion and say, how do we figure this out? I want to get to Greg. I see you over there. I want to get to you. We're going to have a break here coming up, so I don't want to get you and then ask you to hang over. So we'll get to you in just a second. But again, as we're talking about these spending issues, and we'll do it some more probably tomorrow when I'm on Matt's show. I'm sure Matt and I'll talk about it. But we have to keep this conversation going, because if the answer is, well, we're not willing to, anything we like, we don't reduce spending or don't try to be more efficient, and anything they like, we can cut it. Well, Democrats feel the same way, and right now they have the White House and one house, and they have the Senate. So we can trade that, but if the answer is we can only ever reduce spending when you have complete control of government and then you hack the other political parties' priorities, that's bad governing. It just is. We need to say this is a massive problem. We're dumping it on our kids, and we need to start eating a little bit of it now so they're not left eating all of it later. And it stinks. It's not a good way to be, but we need to be sober about it. We got to take a break. This is the Chris Hand Show, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
$11:30 on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories, and we've got the full forecast in 2 minutes. Sexual assault and harassment cases in the military no longer under the chain of command. Shannon Crawford says those cases have been shifted to designated special counsel prosecutors.
Every branch here will have their own specific set of processes, but officials say they've already brought on 160 lawyers to handle these cases, and they're expected to manage up to 50 investigations each per year. But it's still unclear whether this will have a deterrent effect.
Department of Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin calls it the most important reform to the military justice system in more than 70 years. Right now in Tennessee, News 2 reports more than $1.1 million has been approved by the Federal Emergency Management Agency for victims of the December 9th tornado outbreak. A FEMA spokesman says anyone in Davidson, Dixon, Montgomery, or Sumner counties is eligible to apply for that federal aid. That's the latest news. Traffic and weather next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Hi, I'm Paul Winkler. Have you ever thought about why we invest in the stock market? Well, you often hear because we want to protect ourselves from inflation. Well, what is inflation? It's prices going up. Who's raising prices? Companies. What do you own when you own stocks? You own the companies raising prices, so it helps protect us from that. The other thing is this. Think about the most successful people you know. They're typically business owners. And you get to be a business owner when you invest in the stock market. Now, if we think about the stock market, a lot of people worry about, well, what if the stock market drops and it never comes back? Well, this is another thing that I like to explain to people. If the stock market goes down and it never comes back, what does that mean? That means that earnings went down and they never came back up again. So earnings went down. If earnings go down, what else goes down? Taxes go down. If taxes go away, what else goes away? The government goes away. If the government goes away, the FDIC goes away. So think about it. Everything is built on the stock market. That's why I don't ever worry about the stock market going down. Everybody has the same goal in mind when stocks go down. Get it to come back up, because we got to get earnings to come back up. Now, you have two things at your control to get earnings to come back up. One is sales. We can change what we're selling or sell more of whatever we have if we can. And if we can't do that, we can reduce our expenses. And that's exactly what companies do. You'll notice that they lay off people when things get bad, and hence that is why the stock market has recovered from every downturn throughout all of history. Now, if you want to learn more about our approach to investing in financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call or call 615-851-1950.
I'm fancy like Chris Hand. That's right. Fancy like. Got Greg. Greg wants to talk military, and then we'll get to some of the other items, including our excellent immigration policy exercise. Very excited about that. Let's get to Greg first. Greg, what you got, man?
Hey, Cameron, you touched on it. I was in the military, and when we would do an exercise, you know, you were allocated a specific budget. But I remember multiple times, if we didn't use all of the supplies that we went to the field with, such as ammunition, it got buried because you didn't want to turn it in and risk getting your budget cut.
Right.
And I feel like that happens across the military. It's spend every dollar however you have to, and the risk is your budget getting cut, and nobody wanted that.
Well,
so you multiply that by the tons of military personnel out there. I mean, it's no wonder that budget never decreases.
Yeah. Well, first, Larry, thank you or Greg, thank you for your service. The second thing is, sorry, I was looking at Larry on the Super Talk text line and Greg on the phone. But what do you think, as somebody who's served and has looked at these different spending practices, would you rather burn it and say, hey, we're going to just spend every dollar, or say, well, we didn't spend every dollar, now we can see what we shouldn't have budgeted and where we can reallocate it?
Well, that's exactly what needs to be done. If you're running a business, that's exactly what you would do at the year end to see how you could be more efficient. And if you don't need X rounds of ammunition for your troops to qualify and do movements or whatever, then let's reallocate that and maybe give the personnel a raise.
Yeah, amen.
But it's kind of a self-defeating thing and it's amazing. It's across the units, all the way up the chain. They don't want to turn the money back in and have their budget cut, so it's kind of like a rush to waste it.
Yes.
By year end. And that's just, it never made sense to me that was done. But, you know, like I said, multiple times you would have ammunition left over, and it's like, let's dig a hole and bury it.
Yeah, I mean,
what a waste that is.
Well, I appreciate it, Greg. Thank you for your service and the call. I think that you're onto something, and the problem is, tell me how that supports our men and women in uniform. It doesn't. When we could be spending those funds, say, hey, we actually over budgeted on ammunition. We don't need as much as it turns out. So we can allocate that towards housing at a high level, towards paying soldiers more. Like, all that makes so much more sense. And it's something that we should actually do. So I want to pivot a little bit because I want to do this before we run out of time. So I'm looking here at the U.S. Customs and Border Protection numbers for fiscal year 2023 that ended in September. There were it was 2.476 million encounters on the southwest land border over the course of the year. How many states have a population less than 2.476 million? I need your guesses. Anybody got any ideas? Because I think it'll shock you. I'm going to start reading them off. New Mexico, Nebraska, Idaho, West Virginia, Hawaii, New Hampshire, Maine, Montana, Rhode Island, Delaware, South Dakota, North Dakota, Alaska, District of Columbia, not a state, I know that, Vermont, Wyoming. All of those have populations smaller than the amount of illegal immigrants encountered on the southwest land border. That's the ones that Customs and Border Patrol, those are the people that Customs and Border Control actually encountered. The year before that, the number was 2.379 million. Before that, 1.735 million. We're not going in the right direction. And so far, the last 2 months in fiscal 24, 240,986 in October, 242,418 in November. Year over year, those numbers beat everything that was before. And let me give you the number from November 2021, 72,113. So when you look at some of these things from just an honest, fact-based standpoint, we don't need to argue about whether we need to have the problem. We need to discuss what we're going to do about it. And so we've been talking about this a lot in terms of, talk radio. All the shows have mentioned this stuff. And you know who else? What the other thing? We hear about kids in cages, that sort of thing. The overwhelming number of folks coming across in terms of encountering Customs and Border Patrol, single adults. And it's not particularly close. Fiscal 23, 1.514 million. Those were single adults, and then individuals as part of a family unit, 821,000 and change. So, again, facts matter. And that's what we're up against. And I would urge y'all, you can go, and I don't want to pull it all live on the air because it takes me a while to nerd out. But you can go pull the numbers under the Trump administration. You can see. I mean, we've had an ongoing immigration problem that has radically accelerated under Joe Biden. And it's because they think, hey, don't worry. They'll just release you somewhere in the interior. Have fun. I think that we just have to be sober about a lot of this stuff. And this one, again, I want to do this as part of the last two segments here to make sure that we get to it because we started it yesterday. And frankly, I was shocked by the numbers because I was giving y'all some information about basically the different statistical information and reports on pornography and what was going on and why it was a huge issue that we haven't been talking about appropriately. And I want to have that conversation. So there's one report. It's called the Ballard Brief. I want to say it's Brigham Young University, maybe. It was published spring of 2023, and it's entitled Pornography Use Among Young Adults in the United States. And this is going to blow your mind. Pornography is viewed by approximately 69% of American women, 40% of American women in any given year. I want you to think about that. 69% of American men, 40% of American women in any given year. And here's the reason, here's the context that we were talking about this yesterday. So you guys have it again for today. you need to be paying attention to what's happening in your household, with your families, with your kids. Support and public opinion in favor of pornography has increased exponentially over the last several decades. That's what people don't realize, is those of us who grew up in church, grew up in a conservative household, it was like, that stuff's not good for you and we shouldn't do it. And, if you found a Playboy or something like that, it was like, ooh, this is a thing. By today's standards, Playboy is like over-the-counter drug.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even a thing.
No one would bat an eye at that. Yeah.
No, they wouldn't. They probably should, but that's not a thing. What the animal that our kids are encountering, that we're encountering as adults, it's really a problem because, and again, this is the research out there and it's cited. You can come check it out. Using pornography correlates with decreased sex life satisfaction, increased desire for rough and violent sex, and increased chances of divorce. I'm quoting the takeaways from this report. Talks about all of the challenges in the industry and the things that they're hitting, and the prevailing sentiment that shocked me the most was that folks are generally view it positively. That the public is sort of like nonplussed by this. Like, yeah, no big deal. But what we're seeing is that it's messing up our children. That of straight young teen boys and girls, 75% of boys have seen it. This is a different report. This one I was talking to y'all yesterday. This is Common Sense. It's the 2022 report, Teens and Pornography. And again, I have boys in my house, so I just kind of assume I have to watch out. But I think what's happening is a lot of folks who have girls aren't watching out because it's sort of the common cultural narrative is, well, women aren't as interested in this stuff as boys, so don't worry so much. What I'm telling you is I'm sounding the alarm, and I'm telling you got to pay attention here. Most teens have reported that they've consumed pornography. Nearly half, 44%, reported having viewed pornography on school-owned devices. I just want you to think about that. Oof. 1 in 3, these are teenagers. I'll just read it. This way I'm quoting it. Many of the respondents, 41%, reported having seen pornography during the school day, including roughly 1 in 3, 31%, who said they'd viewed pornography while attending school in person. Hello? We've got kids watching porn at school. Among all teens who participated in the survey, 54% reported they had first saw online pornography when they were 13 or younger, including 15% who reported they had seen pornography before they turned 11. I've seen reports as low as 8. So,
whoa,
like we're talking young ages, folks. And this is where you guys were shocked by this. And I wanted to explain what I was looking at. And it had been a little more updated since the last time I had seen these figures. And it's truly shocking, whether it's incidental or intentional or how they're looking at it. It's bonkers. 75% of straight boy teenagers have seen online pornography. 70% of teen girls. Wow. 52% of straight boys and 36% of straight girls have said they watch it on purpose, not just run into it. And you got to think, these are teens answering a survey, right?
Yeah.
So they could be a little skewed here, but that's how many are self-reporting that they're doing this. And it's just messing with their heads. And so while teens who view pornography, 45% felt that pornography gives them helpful information about sex, 27% said that pornography accurately shows the way most people have sex. So they know that it's fake, but they're also saying that it's helpful. I mean, this is what's happening on our watch with our kids. You need, and I mean, some of this is bonkers. It's like hard to read and it's hard to talk about on the air, but I want to kind of mention some of the facts. A majority of teens have indicated they viewed pornography that was aggressive and or violent. 52% who reported having seen pornography noted that it depicted what appears to be rape, choking, or someone in pain. I mean, you got to think about what's happening here, folks. Like, this is what our kids are experiencing. And so if you're not honest about it, if you're saying, no, not mine, not mine, I understand that these are surveys and statistics, but the probabilities are that this is reality for folks in your home if you have teenagers. Even if they're not consuming it regularly on their own, they're exposed to it. And you need to talk about it. You need to engage them, because do you want to have pornography teaching your kids how to engage the opposite sex? Is that what you really want? Because that's what's going to happen. And this was telling, is that a lot of kids are saying that they've had conversations about sex and that type of thing with trusted adults in their lives, but less than half have discussed pornography, which is really interesting. It means that parents are having conversations with their kids about sex, sexuality, all those things, but they're kind of leaving pornography off the table in terms of the conversation.
It's got to be at the forefront.
Right. I mean, it just has to be. It is a reality.
It's uncomfortable, but it's a reality, yeah.
And here's I'm just going to rattle off some of these before we take a break. 59% of teens watch porn once a week or more. 41% watch less than once a week. 12 is the average age when children first consume pornography. It's truly shocking. And I want you guys to hear that. There's, again, all these resources are out there. I'll tweet them out. But have the conversation with your kids. I'm glad that you guys engaged the conversation on air. Talk with them, too. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to The Chris Shands Show, and this is Super Talk 99.7. I love Kid Rock.
He's got it going on, man.
I know. It's just, it reminds me of my years in college.
Drinking whiskey.
All the decisions. All the decisions.
The lack of good ones.
Joan Jones is in the house already.
Woo.
And after confusing me and making me wonder if I had overslept.
Yes.
I'm like, I walked in and I see her and I'm like, what?
I should have messed with him. I should have said, hey, you're not due in today.
Yeah, and I would have walked away. And
like, oh, okay.
Hang on, that wouldn't have been a good thing
Which
to do.
says something about my level of preparation. What have you got prepared? What are you rolling with?
So today I'm rolling with, I've got a really good story about one of the J6 criminals, and I use air quotes, somebody that has had a good outcome in court, which doesn't normally happen to the J6ers. So we'll be talking to him. He's going to join us live, which is really cool. Also, a story about why it's a good idea to raise your kid, and you're going to love this, in a conservative household. It's a very good idea. And by the way, I miss having your kids around here. So I hope you decide to bring them back again.
I've got a teenager that's coming in tomorrow. If I can drag him in, he's not as social as his younger brothers. So we'll see how it goes. But
promise him some food or something.
But what if you're a liberal Democrat? How do you raise your kids in a conservative household? Like, where's the guidebook for that?
I don't know, but
Okay.
I'll tell you. I'm going to tell you why it's a good idea to change your politics. There you go.
Okay.
And I'm going to help you get some free food.
Oh.
Yeah.
Say more.
I'm in.
Come on.
Yeah, I'm the guy at Costco on Saturdays that's like, yes, I'll have a free sample. No, I'm going to take my hoodie off and go back. I like that one.
Yeah.
That way, they don't know it was me.
Well, one of the things I've got lined up is a Costco story because, honestly, what would life be without Costco?
So my youngest son, Hayden, who was in here yesterday, he hunts food. He will roam our neighborhood and go into our neighbors' houses. He'll knock on the door and they'll open the door and he'll just walk in and he'll say, hey, you got any snacks? Because that's intuitive to him that because we're very close with our neighbors. So this is not particularly strange, but yeah, he'll just be like, what kind of snacks you got right now? And that's how he gets free food.
And I would imagine that your neighbors love it. They think it's the coolest thing in the world.
They're like, that is a
they
weird
feel-
kid, but we like this kid. We don't know why he's here. He doesn't know why he's here. Half the time he's walking around and he doesn't care what temperature it is. He's like, I'm going to put on my shorts and that's it. And we're going to go outside.
How old did you say he is?
He's 9.
He's the tallest 9-year-old I think I've ever seen.
Yes.
He's a big kid.
He is a giant, in fact.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, he wears a 9.5 shoe as a 9-year-old.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. Because
is he playing basketball or anything
he plays
like
football.
Okay.
And he is very good at the football because he's bigger than everybody. And and violence is his love language. Like, he has older brothers. So it's like, I want to tackle a thing.
And if we learned anything from him yesterday, it was that his big brothers are annoying.
Annoying.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was listening. I was paying attention.
We are trying over the holidays to make it through the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit series. We actually flipped it, so doing it chronologically with the Hobbit. We
Good for you.
finished Desolation of Smog last night, and he and his oldest brother were sitting next to each other, and the oldest brother would just randomly hug him. And Hayden was like, stop it. Seriously. Stop it right now. Dad, look at it. I'm like, he's trying to hug you. I don't want to be hugged. Don't touch me. I've talked to you. And I'm like, this is everything about being brothers. This is what happens when you raise your children in a conservative home. You're like, why are you hugging me? Like, it's these questions need to be asked, but Joan's going to explain it to you.
Oh, yeah, you bet I am.
She's going to explain. We're going to find the guidebook. I recommend the Bible. Start there.
Yeah.
It's great guidebook. Kind of apolitical, but has all kinds of great information and fantastic stories in there. But she's got a great show coming up. She's filling in for Matt Murphy.
No pressure.
Yeah. Trust me. No pressure. That guy, he's a Georgia fan.
Oh, I see.
Super awkward. What kind of fan are you? Do you do the foosball?
Like football?
The football.
Well, for colleges, yeah, I like Tennessee.
Go Vols.
The Vols. That's right.
We allegedly have to break for the hour. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Chris Hand Show, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.